What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Cast&Blast Podcast. I'm your host, Binche Ben. Joining me is my co-host, Jimmy Trent. Say what's up, Jimmy.
What's up?
And we have our special guest, Chris Sanchez from Texas Parks and Wildlife Division. He's our local game warden, guys. He serves Bell County. Been serving Bell County for, you said?
16 plus. Oh, excuse me. Bell County, about 7 years.
7 years. And you're one of three, correct?
Correct. One of three.
One of three serving our county. And he's got about 16, 17 years of
Game Warden
experience across Texas. So different counties and different terrains, I will say, or different landscapes.
There you go. That's fair enough.
Yeah, Texas landscapes. Yeah, we got some beautiful Texas landscapes, and the reason why I say environments is because there's a conservation effort along with law enforcement for you guys, is there not?
Yes, absolutely.
So I'll let Mr. Sanchez go ahead and explain to us how he serves our community, and not in just the aspect of, hey, I'm a game warden, Mr. Green Pants is showing up, and everybody scatters.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of important things that you do conservation-wise and the regulation. So can you expand upon that a little bit?
So obviously the conservation aspect is, the goal of the division is the goal of the department is to manage and conserve natural resources. So one of the way that your game wardens help facilitate that goal is to do so for enforcement. Not only are we out here to educate folks with rules and regulations, and of course our efforts are hunting, fishing, boating, and of course environmental type of activities, right? So we're not out there just to hem everybody up and take enforcement action for those that maybe have made a mistake. But some of that conservation, of course, as it pertains to our natural resources, is education. Mm-hmm. And part of that education is activities like we're doing today.
Yeah.
So, that's just one aspect. So this is, great in the sense of it's reaching a lot of folks in a short period of time. Mm-hmm. I'm going to imagine that we're going to be talking about all various types of things that are current, our current seasons, if you will. Hunting seasons is long gone in the month of May. But we had some other topics that we'll we will have some other topics that we can discuss. But that education and that opportunity to visit with people is checking for compliance. And that's when we start getting into, are you doing it right? Mm-hmm. Did you know what you were supposed to be doing? And we're talking about water safety, fishing and hunting. Now time is pretty much fishing right now. There's very few hunting. And then, of course, if there's anything else going on, other duties as assigned, as conservation law enforcement officers commissioned by the state of Texas, we do other things besides that as well. So it's not uncommon for us to assist other agencies like Bell County or the municipal agencies, Temple, Killeen, et cetera. Temple more so than Killeen as far as those two examples. But sometimes they just don't necessarily want or think about needing our assistance, but we do, and we work really close with the county. In fact, one of the things that I didn't get done today was meeting with one of the detectives to proceed with game wardens in this county. Two of the three of the game wardens in this county just facilitated and interrupted burglary of habitation in progress.
Oh, wow.
So
can you expand on that?
Without giving you the details?
Yeah, I mean, it could be
call goes over the radio of that particular violation in real time. One of my partners, not saying any names, is privy to the information, and the information that gets relayed over the radio is such that there's pertinent information about private lands, right, private property in close proximity to where this violation was taking place.
I was just kind of, what's an example of that type of violation? I haven't heard that one.
So when we talk about burglary, right, mm-hmm. This particular violation is a felony.
Wow.
Okay. I would imagine, depending on circumstances, there's higher charges and lesser charges based on the totality of the circumstances. That's not my specialty, but I know that where I'm at now, it's felonious. But the nature of the offense took place whereas my partner attached to that particular scenario. So he was one of, at the time, I think 3 officers kind of doing what they were doing. By the time I just coincidentally happened to be in the truck on that particular day. When I say in the truck, it like unfolded as I got in the truck. Wow. I started hearing it and I'm like, what's going on?
Am I hearing this?
And and so, long story short, by request of my partner, I joined him in this particular area and interrupted another same offense at another location.
Good night.
And so, long story short, we're trying to help with that particular case.
Must have been a full moon that day.
It was an interesting day.
The freaks were definitely out.
It was an interesting day. Yeah. So, that's without giving you guys details. The case hasn't.
Man, I bet you got stories upon stories of like seeing. I mean, Jimmy and I just getting out in the woods, fishing and hunting, have bumped into some sketch situations. From damn near meth labs out in the middle of nowhere to people approaching us that look like they're on drugs or.
Unfortunately for us, for anybody out there, when I say us, our constituents, right? Yeah. We're just as much the same constituent when we're not working as you all are. Yeah. The difference is that we're in official capacity, right? It is not uncommon for us to interact with people that are recreating like we want to be recreating, right? Hunting and fishing and water safety, that are utilizing, possessing, however you want to look at it, illicit and unlawful narcotics or sometimes alcohol if they're underage, which presents a hazard to our communities, right? Yeah. It's not safe for people that are impaired to be driving, operating, hunting, shooting, you name it, fill in the blanks. But with the onset of canines, right, in our agency, we started seeing a big, this nose right here isn't as good as a canine nose, especially those that are trained to detect various things. And it's not always about narcotics because we have search and rescue for people and of all states and everywhere as well. But yeah, this day and age, it's just, it's real crazy. And what we start with, whether it be a consensual encounter or a consensual encounter, right? Or just a simple compliance check could turn into, somebody's just made the wrong decisions on that particular day. And we happen to be there and, we don't have a choice but to enforce it.
You're speaking about that, and Jimmy, you brought up some interesting stuff that you were like, man, I wonder how this.
That's what I was about to say. I watch a lot of YouTube, and there's a lot of this on the YouTube. Everybody's got a phone nowadays, so I was going to ask. It seems like it happens very often on a compliance check, say a boater safety compliance check. Game Warden rolls up, and like, hey guys, how you doing? Nice. Hey, we're just going to do a safety check real quick. Let me see your life jackets, stowables, fire extinguishers, whistles, registration, the whole 9 yards. First thing to come out is a phone, it seems like, to start recording. Yeah. So you guys have a chest cam to record, and it seems like that's the first thing, maybe not here so much, but I see it in other states on YouTube and things. Do you run into that often?
I wouldn't say we run into it often. But yes, it's not a stranger. That activity is not beneath us. It does happen within the past month. I'll use that loosely. We're in May. A lot of things tend to blend together to me, right? But I'll say safely. Within the past month, I had that happen to me. And it don't faze me. I mean, it is what it is. But typically, when that's happening, it's because they want to prove their side, and they're going to manipulate it the way that they want. And it is okay. It's their perceptions. But usually that comes into play like our contact has gone sour, right?
Yeah.
we're interacting. What may have started as a positive thing, right, turns into a sour thing for whatever reason either side dictates, right? And now, let's say 75% of the way through the conversation or the contact, however, the inspection, whatever we're doing, right, they want to get out their cell phone and they want to start recording. And what's your badge number, sir? Well, my badge is right here. I'm sitting in front of you. You can see it as I'm writing a citation or whatever it is I'm trying to do. And it's not that I wouldn't tell him my badge number. My badge number will be at the top of the citation.
Okay.
Right. But they're filming it to make their own point.
It has to be frustrating.
Yes.
To me, it's
frustrating. And sometimes it can get underneath your skin a little bit. And if they push the right buttons on the wrong day, things escalate or whatever. But we got to maintain our professionalism.
Yeah, be disciplined. I mean, that's definitely.
No, they don't realize you got a camera too. Yeah. So I mean,
I tell them.
Yeah.
It's very visible.
Yeah. It's visible, but it's not always obvious that it's recording.
Sure.
Yeah.
So right now, you guys probably can't even tell. I turn this body camera is completely shut off.
Okay.
And that's to save my battery, right?
Sure.
While I'm out there. But if I turned it on, you guys would know it got turned on because the way that the camera operates.
Okay.
But if I push a certain series of buttons, you'll never know it's recording.
Understood.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But it could be, depending on, like, if I was working with either of my partners, they don't do certain things on their camera that I do. In other words, they don't run it. Sometimes I want people to know what the camera's running, and sometimes I don't.
Yeah.
But when they start their cameras, I'm like, hey, you're welcome to record. If I'm dealing with the two of you and it's safe to do so, by all means, sir, you guys feel free to keep on recording. Yeah. Understand, I've got a complete and true copy from point A to point B, not halfway in between. So if I think that there's an issue, I'm going to say, you started your camera, 10 minutes into the contact. Why didn't you start it 10 minutes ago? If they started, here comes the blue lights on the water. Yeah. Here comes the red and blues. And on YouTube, I watch those videos too. They're starting that camera when the minute they get pulled over, and they're sometimes setting us up, right? They're setting us up for what they think is going to be a failure, right? Well, let's see what we're going to get stopped for this time.
Sure.
And that's fine. But if the officer's professional and on point, they usually don't put that on YouTube. It's when we mess up, right? And nobody's perfect.
More often than not, what I've noticed is people, they start recording when they know that they're in the wrong somehow, so they know it's going to go south for them. So they're looking for a hiccup in the process, so that they say, "Oh, see, that was a mess up." And I'm like, man, just man up and take it. If you mess up, you mess up.
Yeah, but sometimes it's hard for them to understand when they have that mindset. It's not on them. They didn't do anything wrong. Well, we wouldn't. In a water safety aspect, they don't necessarily did anything wrong. But if you're getting pulled over as a traffic violation, 90, I don't even want to put a number on there. The majority of the time that you're getting stopped on traffic is because there was some offense broken, right? There was some rule violated. We don't just stop people just to stop them.
But you can for certain things, correct?
Game wardens or officers?
Game wardens,
okay.
Particularly on the water. So if you see fishing poles, you can say, hey, I want to do a resource check or whatever correct. You guys call it.
Yeah, that's
I don't think people understand that, though. I think that they think they can just drive by, hey, 10 and 2, just don't look over there, keep going, we're
That's
good.
what we call a clue.
Right.
And that does happen. So, using the water, on the water, because you're on the water in a boat, you can get stopped by not only a game warden, but any certified marine safety enforcement officer. So it could be a county officer, it could be a municipal officer, depending on your location, it could be a park officer, any MSEO certification that's come in through Parks and Wildlife. Because you are on the water, the laws say that you are subject to being checked, okay? Now you take that from the water, and now you're at the water's edge, and you have the means and I'll say you have the equipment, right, to engage in activity governed by Parks and Wildlife Code, right? Fishing equipment, hunting equipment. You have the means and the methods. Mm-hmm. You can get checked for compliance. Just because they're not engaged in the activity doesn't mean they're not doing the activity. And what I mean by that is, if I see the two of you unloading all of your fishing equipment from your vehicle that you just parked at XYZ fishing location, right? Whether it be the lake, the pond, the river, the creek, whatever the case may be, and you just unloaded and now you're starting to walk, what is the intent?
We're going to have a picnic.
Mm-hmm. After you catch your fish.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Right.
So the way that...
I'm not fishing. He's fishing.
That's correct. And you're just carrying his equipment.
Right. Yeah.
But now you're at a community fishing lake and there's 4 poles. Well, guess what? He's now over his limit because you're carrying his poles. Does that make sense? So the way that the state Parks and Wildlife defines fishing, hunting, right, is capture, trap, take, or kill said resource, or the attempt to do the same. So you don't even have to throw your line in the water. You are intending to go to the water to attempt to catch fish. If you don't have a license, now am I going to give you that ticket? Probably not. I'm going to turn you around and say you need to go get your license before you wet that line. But if you've already wet your line, I didn't catch anything, sir. I wasn't fishing.
I'm scouting.
I'm practicing.
Yeah.
Here's what, I mean, I watch a lot of these YouTube videos too, or TV shows or anything where, particularly the Game Wardens, and I'm not talking about Texas just alone. Like there's shows everywhere where they talk about this stuff or they show examples of an encounter between the Game Warden and the DNR or whatever. Mm-hmm. What people don't realize is that whole, I wasn't fishing and this and that, you know, the videos and the production do a good job of kind of building up the anticipation, and they just show the Game Warden. Drama.
Yeah.
They just show the Game Warden walking up, or they see them driving up to a place, and you don't know what was going on before those two people. I guarantee you
that Game Warden been watching.
That Game Warden's been watching those people.
Watching.
Now, why are you guys going to just tell us all? Tell
it's
people all of
moment.
our. Okay,
it's
well,
a teachable
I'll
moment.
tell you that you are pretty accurate.
Yeah.
That's a very safe statement. No, I won't even say assumption because it was a statement, and yes, you are correct. A lot of the things that we do when we're talking with people, right? If you're out there doing what you're supposed to be doing and there's no issues, I'm going to find out in about the first 3 to 5 minutes, mm-hmm. because I already have a preconceived idea based on observation, right? Before you saw me or my partner, or what information was given to me that brought me to this particular location, okay? So once I get there, you're not really going to know why I'm there outside of what I tell you. Do you think that we get lied to every now and again?
Probably on a daily basis.
I would imagine it's quite often.
Yeah. Did you know it's not against the law for us to lie to people?
Yep. I did.
You do have to tell me you're a cop, though, right?
It should be obvious.
Why is that a thing? We're like, you got to tell me you're a cop, right?
It's like if you're in a gang.
Well, if I show up looking like this with a gun and a badge,
it's a good chance.
I am required to identify myself. Okay.
Okay.
And I might say, hey, state game warden.
Okay.
But I'm not going to say I'm the cop fixing to do this. But yes, I'm required to identify myself as a game warden, and then tell you why I'm there to tell you. Now, if I'm there to check compliance, hey, real quick, state game warden. Now, that might not be the first things out of my mouth, because usually as I show up, or any one of my partners shows up dressed in professional attire, right? They're already making conversation, doing some sort of action where they understand who's coming. Mm-hmm. And so it may be within the first minute, after casual conversation. All right, guys, well, hey, just so you know, I am one of your local game wardens, and I'm going to need to check this. We may have spent a minute or two BSing about whatever that conversation, because those people that want to interact with us, they're doing right. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, we need to check compliance.
Yeah.
And so just because we're having that dialogue doesn't mean we're not going to check, right? Do you know who I am?
I would even venture to say, even having a dialogue, the Milam County Game Warden, we talk to him pretty frequently. He snuck up on us and checked us one day, and we talked to him.
By surprise.
Caught us by surprise, out of nowhere. Yeah, and he,
we were washing off the
Ranger
after day of guiding, and I'm sitting there in deep getting mud off of there, and I turned around. I was like, "Whoa, how did you show up?" Man, this guy came out of nowhere, and I was like, "Hey," and he's like, "How you guys doing?" And we're like, "How was your day?
He was like,
any luck today?"
Yeah, he was like, y'all get anything today? I think we shot like 4 deer that day,
and we're like, yeah, our hunters did.
4 deer.
So we're like, yeah, and he's like, you guys got any of the stuff? It's like, man, those things are on their way with the tags, and the hunters are on their way home. Okay, let me see your log. We show him the log, and he's like, okay, cool. Looks at everything. He's like, damn, you guys are getting after him.
And he looked him up. He's like, damn, you guys are tearing them up.
But then he's like, okay, your tags, your paperwork, everything's here. You got all the documentation correct. He was just doing his job. Mm-hmm. But good point of, hey, if you're not doing anything wrong, no matter what your reaction was, he surprised me. I could have been like, oh, God,
I guess my point is even having a conversations often with the game where you're not safe. It's not like it's not like oh, that's my buddy.
Yeah.
We're good. You know what I'm saying?
No, and I like to tell.
There's a job.
Yeah. There, just because we're talking doesn't mean we're not going to take care of our business, right? Mm-hmm. Regardless of who you are. And, I made comment, do you know who I am? And I may or may not know, especially when I came into this area, right?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
You know who I am?
Yeah. When I came in, I didn't know certain prominent individuals in this area, right? In the area I've been across, in the 3 different duty stations I've served as a game warden, you learn those individuals as time goes on. Sometimes I can answer, honestly, I have no idea, but it really doesn't matter because all I'm doing is checking for whatever regulation that needs to be checked for, and then making an enforcement decision based on the totality of the circumstances. And I just watched a YouTube the other day, and it was not conservation law enforcement, obviously. It was a traffic stop, and the officer had somebody pulled over for obvious violations that they articulated. The officer did a really good job interacting with said person who was somehow tied into that community, and they pulled that. Do you know who I am? And pretty much, I don't want to say threatened, but voiced very strongly that this officer was making a mistake. That job was on the line.
I've seen a couple of those. I kind of go down a wormhole watching those one after another.
As soon as they say, "Do you know who I am?" That's a threat to your job at that point. To me, that's how I perceive it.
I mean, he could be the owner of that food truck. Be like, "Man, I'm the owner of that food truck."
At the end of the day, that particular interaction, the citations were issued. The officer did a good job. There was no concern with the supervision of that particular entity, and the alleged violator paid said citations and did some type of apology and community, whatever the case may have been. But that stuff, that it irks us. But at the end of the day,
comes with the job.
Yeah, that's part of. We signed up to do that, right? Public safety, right? Speak for, in this case, our people, our property, our resources. If we can't do it, who's going to do it? If we're not going to be able to do it, shame on us. Then we need to find a different career.
Well, you guys got a tough job, man. There's a lot of enforcement, regulation, and everything that happens on a regular out there. But there's a lot of other things you guys get, I'll say, called out to. I know you were working today. You had some calls today. It's a miracle you're not covered in mud head to toe with all the weather that we're experiencing. So speaking of weather, man, I mean, that's changing the environment
From what it's been for the past year, it's a complete different environment.
Yeah, so this time last year, our local lakes, you could have built a condominium out in the middle of it. Safe to say.
The edge of the center, but yes.
Well, I'm talking, I guess, if I have to be specific about a lake. So here, the closest lake here is Stillhouse. And if you cross the bridge that goes from here towards Salado, there was landmass under the river was dry. It was bad.
I'll put it this way. This time, maybe not this time last year, but say August last year. I think that lake was at 63% capacity.
Which I have to argue. It had to be lower.
Seemed lower
Don't
than that.
get me to talking about numbers. It was at a record low.
Did you at any time feel, and you've been in this county for a while, did you at any time feel that was going to be a catastrophic low? Like, we're not going to see this rise here in the next couple years. I said, well, I'm not getting a boat anytime soon. There's no point. I mean, it was like,
I knew it was catastrophically low based on record, the duration, right? We've been in a drought for years. It was the lowest I had seen it because guess what? I'm here for the past 6-7 years, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that I felt concerned about, if it was going to come back up because I just thought it would be a matter of time. I didn't think it would be as quick as it was. But I've experienced this phenomenon in Central Texas, south of us in Travis County.
Okay.
So 10 years ago, give or take, and don't quote me on the numbers because everything blends to me, but we'll just say, roughly 10 years ago, as Travis County is, Lake Travis is currently low. It's still low. Mm-hmm. We got blessed with some water at the right spots, and we're above capacity on pretty much all of our water bodies here.
Yeah.
Travis County, Lake Travis specifically, not so much just yet. But that time frame when we talked about, if that water body got filled back up, we were anticipating the concerns that we're getting ready to talk about now, because we talked about these, what we consider flood waters, right?
Yeah.
This water falls in a watershed, and all of that watershed gets funneled down into this, this water body, right? The lake itself, the containment, right?
Right.
And with those moving waters, it brings in a lot of debris. Well, when that was forecasted in Travis County years back, there was a concern of if it happened too fast, kind of like this past couple of weeks, that debris was going to cause havoc. I mean, structures were going to be, ripped off from the sides of the lakes, and then we're going to have all this, mass debris field. And when it happened, it didn't really come to fruition. Yes, there was debris. It was manageable based on circumstance. Now, fast forward to present day in Lake Belton, even as the last forecast I heard is we're getting some more tomorrow.
Yeah, I think 2 to 3, maybe 4 inches.
But I'm not privy to it because I don't have time to watch, but I'm aware of, Stillhouse, the Lampasas, had an influx of debris, and unfortunately that debris consisted of, woody vegetation and trash, and, but it also contained or included livestock,
wildlife,
livestock, and we'll just say animals. Okay, wild and I'll say domestic, but
sure,
I don't necessarily know of any pets, but horses, cows, deer, all the different things that are running in the wild, right, where water's not supposed to be. And there's a lot of things going on. We fielded a lot of calls, but livestock's not our forte, right? And, the community wants us to get out there and
recover or rescue and all that.
There you go, rescue. I didn't field one of those calls directly. I got one specifically after the fact, but one of my partners fielded it, resolved it in such a manner that was, it was resolved. But that, we cannot go out there. We are not equipped with, we're not going to go out there in our boats and rodeo a living, 1,000-pound animal. It's going to take us for a swim. It's not safe for us to do that. unfortunately, but people were doing it. It just wasn't us. People, and the kindness of their hearts, were out there trying to help those animals. But I did get a call for displaced deer, and try and get them some help with our permitted rehabbers. But the concern for the debris was, what's it going to do for our recreators? That water subsides. In theory, it's supposed to subside once it gets, stops moving. Those animals, if they're able, are going to bound back, right? They're gonna recoup, or they're not.
There's one aspect to it that I'm kind of worried about, especially this time of year with the floods. It's one thing that we were going to mention is the turkey population and how, certain counties, next year, I think there may not be any turkey hunting in, certain counties, and then some counties are split. But with these flood waters happening, a lot of turkeys tend to, they stay around water. So lowlands, around rivers, creeks, and things like that. This time of year right now, they're nesting too. So a lot of those nests with low turkey numbers are probably going to be broken up. So that it could potentially lead to a lot less turkey numbers for the next 3 to 5 years.
That would always be a concern, a possibility. That's definitely beyond my scope as an officer, right? Our biologists usually start tracking that kind of stuff. Their type of, biological behaviors, nesting criteria, this, that, and the other. But yeah, it's definitely a concern. That's a wildlife. That's a species. If we were already short with seasons based on population densities, then yes, that definitely could have a very detrimental effect on him. But it's too soon to even go down that.
Yeah, too soon. Yeah, exactly.
But I think that's the difference of dealing with Mother Nature affecting regulation than, say, how can I say, like population control? You know what I mean? Because in this case, we talk about numbers and we talk about seasons year after year and how, man, I feel like there was less birds this year than there were last year, and there was less this than there was. Well, Mother Nature is
it's always trying to balance.
It is. So what may not be in abundance this year could be twice as good next year. And you just got to kind of be patient. A real outdoorsman is just going to be like, hey, I'll roll with the punches. Yeah. We see a lot of the social media community, bitching and griping about like, hey, let's sign a petition about the regulation of this animal count for next year and vice versa. It's like, oh, well, this year they let us take this many. They're talking about taking that. Look at the trout numbers. Look at everything across the board, not just birds, but it'll go down.
Whoever signed the petition for the rain, I'm glad they did. We were fishing last year. We knew it was bad because we started catching fish with ticks on them, and we're like, damn, we need some rain.
Yeah, man.
Sure, they were ticks.
Yeah. It's just, it was looking rough. I think we can all agree that the lakes were it was not looking promising. And here we are. Yeah. And we got livestock, everything being affected by it. What is that doing for the fishery? What is that doing for the community as a whole? We see some ramps opening up that have been closed for
opening, closing, opening. It's hard to keep up. There's a lot of factors in there. So what's it doing? I can only speak from my observations within the past week or two.
Yeah.
So with the onset of water, let's start with what types of opportunities are now out there. With the water, and I'll use Lake Belton as one example because I'm not familiar with any rules being specifically attributed to Stillhouse. I know the effects of Stillhouse, but let's talk about Belton.
Sure.
So the water's up. Mm-hmm. People know that the water's up. People that have boats want to come out and use them. It's been too long, and they want to get out there. The weather's been nice for the most part. When the water stopped and the sun shined, this past weekend being
beautiful.
Saturday more so than Sunday, but Saturday was a beautiful day. Sunday, I think it rained pretty much all day, and we had some more wet weather events. But on Saturday, the weather was beautiful, and we couldn't visit with but a small portion of the recreators that were out on the lake. There were just so many on Lake Belton, start to finish. I didn't, on a typical, and this goes back to when I first got here, coming from Lake Travis to Lake Belton was pretty much night and day difference. The sheer number of people recreating, the numbers were crazy opposites. So when I come to Lake Belton and I get on the water, depending on the time of day, I can, on most days, visit with more than half of the population that are on the water. Mm-hmm. And it's just a rough idea. I'm not going to give you numbers, but more than 50%. And we don't necessarily need to check the same individuals over and over again. But that constitutes Lake Belton from the dam all the way up to the 36 bridge. And that's a pretty, that's a wide stretch. Yeah. Okay. This past Saturday, with it being as busy as it was, I couldn't go from nothing but Temple Lake Park and maybe a half a mile in either direction.
Good night.
Because of the amount of traffic.
You know how many people are not going to be in that spot the next nice day?
Well, and that's the beginning, man.
Depends on circumstance.
Yeah.
Not everybody got into trouble.
School's about to be out for summer. You're going to have people taking summer vacations. All that stuff is about to get, the clouds are starting to break through. We're starting to see the sun come through. Fishing's picking up. You got a lot of that going on. The boaters are getting on the water more, probably more than the whole entire year, right, based off our conditions. With that said, the water levels are higher, but we're still not at quite where we were, say, a year and a half ago.
I think we are. We're right at 100.
Well, I could tell you this. There's areas that you could see a little bit of timber coming through, but right below that timber is a huge tree. What I'm getting at is, if you don't know this lake and you're getting out there, or these lakes, and you're getting out there and you're hauling ass across the lake, what may seem like a small, little bit of,
what looks like a small chunk of wood could be an entire tree on it. You
and that's my concern is, like, there's going to be a lot of people misjudging. Of course, most of these guys got
ski engine, like you said, hauling ass across.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about those, water potential accidents or whatnot, and I'm sure it's got to be keeping you guys busy.
Yeah, so let me touch on that, because that's going to affect those people, right? The people that may or may not be accustomed to Lake Belton. Back to Saturday's adventure, because it's always an adventure when there's a lot of people out there on the water. There were folks from Austin area recreating on Lake Belton.
Travis was too full.
There's not enough water on Travis for them to enjoy it, so they're relocating and they're exploring up here. Those individuals that may not be familiar with Lake Belton didn't take the opportunity for the past few years to go out there and mark those hazards that you're talking about. Because when the lake is almost 20 feet below normal level,
perfect time to go out there and mark hazards.
You're seeing a lot of difference in the perspective of, I had no idea. Those are those big trees that everybody talks about. Those trees that we only see.
Yeah.
The tip, right, is nothing more than, a big log, right? A redwood giant, to be different than just the actual snag. Sure. And so, but when the water is now up, now it's presenting its own types of hazards, because now water is above things where water's not supposed to be. And if you don't know that, you have a whole new set of hazards. Now you talk about the debris that was coming down from all of the watersheds.
Okay.
That's free floating. That free floating debris can be just as detrimental to your equipment, to your well-being, to your safety, right? Depending on how you're operating. If you hit something big at high speeds, you're more likely to have a catastrophic effect, ripping something off, transom, depending on your type of boat. ejecting somebody from sitting in a spot where they shouldn't have been sitting, all that. So when in doubt, run slower. If you don't know the lake, get to know it before you run it. There's spots on the lake that I would normally, on Lake Belton specifically, that I would normally run, and I'd be comfortable running through certain cuts. I'm not there yet. I know the water's high, but all that opportunity for vegetation to grow hasn't shed just yet.
True.
So I know where we should be running, and that's where we need to be for the next who knows how long. But yeah, those hazards are still out there. But sometimes we have no choice but to run fast if we got a hot call. We are sometimes call driven. Fortunately, this past Saturday, no calls while we were on the water, which is good for us, right? Sometimes those calls do come into play, and then those calls are when bad things are happening, boat accidents, whatever the case may be. Something going on in progress that requires immediate attention, and sometimes we have to go from point A to point B at full throttle. Hopefully, people get out the way. The law requires folks to acknowledge those marine safety enforcement officers that are shining the blue lights on the water, and the law requires them to yield until they understand what we're doing. One of the individuals that I visited with on Saturday past failed to yield to said lights. He had no idea. And I turned him on in such a manner, if you two are approaching me on smaller watercraft than my big watercraft, and you're approaching me at this angle, but I'm going to offset myself so that we don't go on a collision course, but you're facing me in such a way that you should see me when I click that button that turns on blue lights. Well, that means I want you to slow down. I'm fixing to talk to you. And one of them slowed down, didn't even, matter of fact, I think they actually held their distance. Because, we're talking about 100 yards or so before I'm like, they're coming to me at a high rate of speed, so let me just slow them down and we're going to say hello. One of them, gained maybe 50 yards and then kind of just stopped. And the other one just kept on going. And
he said, not today. Not today.
And just completely. And I made reference to another officer I had on board. I'm like, well, this is going to be interesting. Because to the letter of the law, he's failing to yield. Now, it wasn't what you would consider, a pursuit on the water. But I thought it might turn into that. At the end of the day, we finally got to talk, and
I wonder how
he was educated.
How often does that happen? Trying to run from the law on the water. You're not going to,
You're only going to go so far.
You're only going to go
unless you're on open waters, right? Like intercoastal or anything like that.
But on a
lake,
you're only going to get so far. As far as you're going to be allowed, it always depends on your watercraft. The only time on Lake Belton in my 7 years, I had to, quote unquote, I'll use the word follow. The distance I had to follow was pretty much the entire distance. So you guys familiar with Cap Kachina?
No.
Okay, you know where Morgan's Point?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So think about the cove from Morgan's Point, and then you got TLP to the south, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Before you get to Morgan's Point, Camp Kachina is coming down lake.
Oh, I think
Camp Kachina is where the influx is, right? The water intake.
Okay.
Just past Rogers. So
yeah.
Yep.
It's the halfway point between Rogers Park and Morgan's Point. Yeah.
High Bluffs.
It's low because it's the Girl Scout camp. They have access to the water. Oh, so you're coming from Rogers, you're coming around the corner to go to Morgan's Point. So it's kind of like the halfway in between point. But you all know where Highway 36 is.
Oh, yeah. Good way.
That's a hell of a...
I started the blue lights at Highway 36. After engaging the vessel like this, I turned around on the vessel at the 36 bridge.
It's not like he's got a rear view mirror.
Turned. You are correct. We'll talk about that. Turned around there and made it all the way to the marina.
That's a hell of a jaunt.
It was about 20 minutes at
there has to be a condition where you're on a boat and blue lights are reflecting over you and your passengers, and you're not recognizing like, that's weird.
That's some cool party lights.
Yeah.
Well, that's the responsibility of the captain, right? The operator of the boat. And honestly, anybody occupying said vessel, right? So I tell all the folks that I visit with on the water, Captain, it's your responsibility to maintain a proper lookout. 360 degrees, maybe more if there's dimensions, right? 580 if you have to look up and bridges and whatnot. But on our lake, 360 degrees. But their passengers, and I commend them when they do it, when the passenger says, hey, you need to pay attention because those guys got their blue lights on, I give them kudos because that tells me that their passengers are doing good. Sometimes it doesn't happen in a timely manner, and sometimes I time it in such a way like, all right.
Sometimes the passengers are like, hey, there's some blue lights. You should go faster.
Blue lights and green pants. Just go.
Passenger wearing such and such.
Yeah.
But the law says you have to have that proper lookout. And the law says that you have to yield or at least slow down to acknowledge to figure out what's going on. The blue lights doesn't necessarily mean that you're being stopped, but you need to be aware because if I'm trying to overtake, right, or get around for whatever reason, I don't want to be fighting the wake of your boat, or I don't want you turning into my path, etc. So that's why that reduction in speed is pertinent to that regard. But yeah, I have not called a pursuit over the radio on the lake. Usually the radio, we'll have somebody wherever they're going, we'll have somebody there before they get there.
I feel like we're getting new lakes now, like this water we're finally getting back. But speaking of new lakes or reservoirs, Bodark Lake up by Bonham, Texas, North Texas now. So I was reading that's the first reservoir Texas has built in the past 30 years. So I'm pretty excited to see that. And they added, I think, 17,000 acres-ish, good large lake. Have you heard anything about, I know that they did the Toyota Share Lunker program, and they very well-stocked lake, and they're saying, in the next few years, it may be another OHIV, and I'm like, oh, dude, that's cool, man.
Interesting.
That'll be awesome.
So speaking of stocking lakes, you guys how do y'all participate in stocking? Is it lakes? Is it fisheries? I've seen the reports where annually they'll announce, hey, we're going to be stocking, whether it's catfish or rainbow trout or whatever. That's an interesting.
So the department has a community outreach, right? Neighborhood fishing lakes was what I think you're getting at.
There you go, yeah.
And they're not always lakes. They're
small ponds, maybe parks.
But also, and I'll just use those that are in this area.
Yeah.
Nolan Creek being one of them. So Nolan Creek gets stocked during.
I did not know that.
During the winter. Well, it's very interesting because Nolan Creek just flooded.
Where did it go?
So but here's the thing. So Nolan Creek is one of the few bodies of water, and I'll name some of the other ones too. But Nolan Creek gets stocked in the winter months for our cold water fish, rainbow trout. It's a good opportunity for people to come out and recreate and catch themselves some good eating fish. I mean, that's what they're there for. They're there for catching for consumption, and guess what? There's no minimum size limit. Now, there's a bag limit, and some people don't always pay attention to that, or they intentionally take their more than their fair share, and those are the people that we need to be educating. We need help with your constituents, right? The people of the state who are abiding by all the rules and regulations. We need them to call us to report, hey, I'm out here at XYZ location, and I know that there's a bag limit, but I've watched these guys do it like 4 different times. They'll get their bag, they'll go over here, they'll do this, and they come back. They may have changed a shirt or whatever the case may have been, but they're they're intentional violators. But that's Nolan Creek. That same resource is also in Carl Levin Park, right?
Yep. Do you know that?
Trout is also
they stock that with trout, man.
Had no clue.
Take your kids down there. I used to take Gabby when she was tiny.
And let me tell you, those trout, the ones I've been seeing past couple winters, they're good eating size. Now there's some tiny ones in there too, but the average one, makes me jealous because I like to eat trout. So
I didn't know they were in there.
Yeah. You just got to follow the annual
stocking schedule.
schedule.
And all that's on our website.
See, and those are opportunities, especially for families to get out. You know, everyone's always wondering, like, how can I get to the water? Where can I go fish with my kid? Where can I do that? Just go on the website, research the annual stock. You can catch it at a good time. If you do it right, you can take a day off of work and get your kid out and go out there and do a day where it's less crowded. But I'll tell you this, I've been out to like Carl Levin. I've been out to places out by Decker and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And you get out there on a day and you'll just be like, there'll be a circle around that pond and everyone's out there just.
And they're usually circled around that pond waiting for the truck to stock it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because they know when they come, it's posted on the schedule, mm-hmm. and so they're just waiting. When those fish go in there, the lines are in the water. I mean, and they're catching them pretty quick right after they get in there.
Trout is fun, and that's a fairly inexpensive way to get into fishing or get your kids into fishing too.
Right, yeah.
So it was a good one to get in.
And then, of course, that's your cold water months. Now, in the springtime, they focus more on those that can sustain the warmer temperatures, right? Catfish being one of them. They're stocking the catfish, this time. I'm not sure. I don't follow when they stock the catfish, but I do follow the trout because we have problems with people cheating.
Yeah, trying to jump on that.
Yeah.
And do they do it in the wintertime because they don't intend to stay in there long? That's probably
water temperature.
Water temperature. They're not going to survive.
Yeah. But supposedly.
Sure.
Now, it's not to say that they haven't survived. I'm not aware of people catching trout this time of year under normal circumstances, but I wouldn't put, wildlife, sometimes they're kind of funny, and they may be able to stay around if they find a deep enough water, if there's enough to sustain them, right?
Cold water spring around or something.
Yeah, something where they can continue to feed, right, so they don't perish. But now what's happened? What we talked about wildlife displacement. If there were any trout left over in Nolan Creek, how far down did they go?
Yeah, they're in the Gulf by now.
Yeah, well, I don't know where that creek, I don't know where the Nolan Creek ties into, but the same thing goes with our ponds, our community fishing lakes. They get inundated with water, and sometimes I was working a community fishing lake out in West Texas when I first back in the day, right? There's a phenomenon where the pond. Let me think if I can remember if I say it right. The pond turns, if I remember correctly. And when it does that, there's a depletion of oxygen, and we have a big die-off of fish. I want to say that's the terminology, but I haven't seen that in Central Texas, but out there it happened to me once or twice. And, the fish take a hit on it. But it's just another avenue. But those relationships with Parks and Wildlife, those neighborhood fishing lakes, they're usually within the municipalities that they're doing some type of recruit and outreach, right? And it's a cost for that resource to be stocked, but it's for the community, and that's why it's late. That's part of the community is the neighborhood fishing lakes. Is it's that opportunity that not only the local communities but the agency, the department wants to people, it's another avenue to get them out there and enjoy the outdoors.
And it's good to see people get out and enjoy it and do it. Waiting on the truck, right.
When you're not working, I bet the Game Wardens have the best spots to go to. Like, I know where to go and bang for the buck. I'm going to get in here, hit, fish, get out. Yeah, hunting, I know where to go. And I have a question for you that's kind of unrelated. What kind of superstitions do you guys have, say on the water, out in the field, that kind of like it's a known thing, like a banana on a boat? Absolutely not. There's got to be a superstition that you guys have. Like if you pull up to a site, you see a certain thing, and it's usually like a red flag. I would imagine over the period of time, you guys got some interesting games that you got internally.
This is going to be good to hear.
Yeah.
So the banana on the boat was a relatively new phenomenon for me. I don't know, 5-6 years ago is when it was brought to my attention. I'm not very superstitious, but sometimes, things that I've learned over my career, I no longer can tell my family when I'm coming home, because the minute I do, something unfolds. If I tell you I'm going to be home within the hour, then historically that hour turns into 4 or 5 hours, or sometimes even longer.
Yeah.
So it's not superstitious, but I just stop telling them when I'm going to be home.
Just say soon. Don't give a limit. Soon.
Yeah, we don't have shifts, so we go to work when we need to go to work. Just because I left the house at XYZ time doesn't mean I'm going to be home 8 hours later. Sometimes it's earlier, sometimes it's later. You watch, I think we all are watching, various things on YouTube or, videos or whatever the case may be. And, and you see officers and they hit each other. And you're like, why did you say that? You just cursed us, right?
Yeah.
So those are the types of things that you're looking for or relating to.
Yeah.
I don't have any. The banana, some folks in my, don't bring that banana on the boat.
Yeah.
It's bad luck.
Yeah.
But no, outside of my personal thing with my family, sometimes it's going to happen. I think one of those would be, it's been pretty quiet on the radio.
Yeah.
And then the phone blows up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
I know for
it's
us,
going to happen no matter what.
We could relate to that. All three of us were either in Iraq or Afghanistan at some time. And if it was a quiet day,
don't say nothing.
You better not say anything, because that was usually the day. Yeah, the sky started falling, and we're like, man. But it's those kind of things, We know there's some human aspects to our local game wardens out there. You guys probably there's quite often, more often than not, I'll say that you guys you're looking forward to a good day. You're not looking forward to go out and ruin it. It's a misconception that people think you're out there to go and ruin people's times.
I think it's a misconception, too, about, like we were talking about earlier in the beginning of the conversation, how they say Game Wardens got more power or more jurisdiction, whatever the word is, than everybody. But no, it's not just that. It's that they don't know what your authority does carry, like what that person does that gives you authority, as far as like carrying the fishing poles or showing, wearing camo and carrying a gun and being like, oh, I'm not hunting, I'm,
Yeah.
I mean, you give off the clues, and that gives them the authority to do what they do.
Yeah.
Or they just don't understand, well, if I would have known you could do that, I wouldn't have done this. We've had that. I've heard that on more than one occasion.
Well, education, that's a huge part about what you guys do, but it's not your responsibility too. That's
just about our professionalism, and most game wardens, I haven't worked with all, 500 plus of us that are out there across the state. And I'm sure that every agency has, whether it be game wardens across Texas, game wardens across the nation, officers in this agency versus officers in that agency. But, as game wardens, our interactions with people are a little bit different. We're out there for regulation of our resources, public safety, right, on top of that, and to educate people. Now, there's enforcement that comes when things aren't the way that they're supposed to be, but sometimes that enforcement isn't always a ticket. It could be a warning, verbally or written, but it could just be, all right, let's fix this problem now, and now it's education, right? Why did you do this instead of this?
Which is good, because in all fairness, if you're a frequent recreationist, fishing, hunting, boating, trapping, whatever the case is, if you do frequently, you're going to unintentionally break the law somehow. It's so broad and so many that honestly, it's hard to keep up with it all, but it's out there, and it is your responsibility.
That's correct. It's up to each one of us as a responsible sportsman to do our part to play by the same sets of rules.
Man, again, I thank you for coming out with us. We look forward to having you anytime you want to come out and join us. Let us know, and we'll start collecting some questions for the next time we get you out here.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, hope you enjoyed this podcast, man. Keep
the questions coming.
Keep the questions coming, and we'll see you on the next one.